Hello and welcome to the Doof Book Club, our monthly live stream discussion of a book chosen by you, our listeners. My name is Matt Freeman, and I'm joined as always by my friend. He's actually just a giant talking cat, but you can call him Scott Daly.
Don't worry, I'm only a hallucination. I'm not real. All of this is a hallucination. It has been this entire time. It's the only logical way to explain any of this. So just go with it. It'll be fine.
Yeah, just a little hypnosis. No big deal.
Hello, everyone, and welcome. I hope everyone is having a wonderful Friday evening. I'm sure we know a lot of people here, but if you happen to be stumbling upon us for the very first time, welcome. We are Doof Media, and we make podcasts all about the stories we love. We also arrange and organize this here monthly book club. Matt, explain, please, for the 75,000th time, what a book club is, please.
Well, each month, Scott and I select 5 books from a pool submitted to us by our wonderful Doof community. We put up a poll for all the supporters on Patreon at patreon.com/doofmedia and let them vote on which they'd like us to talk about. The book with the most votes wins, and then we all read it.
Then we get together on the last Friday of the month, or I guess sometimes the first Friday of the next month when we have plans on the last Friday of the month, and to talk about it for a little while. We are going to get into this month's book, but before we do that, we do have a little bit of work to do here, because we also let our live listeners get a vote in what we're covering the next month. So we have a poll on Patreon. And we also let people listening live get a vote in that as well. So I am going to send a link out right now to a straw poll. You will be able to pick 2 of the 5 books up for nomination, and we will add those to our Patreon votes. And at the end of the episode, we will discuss and announce what book we're going to be covering next month. All right, with that out of the way, Matt, what book are we talking about this month?
This month, we're talking about The Master and Margarita. And the summary is as follows. One hot spring, the devil arrives in Moscow, accompanied by a retinue that includes a beautiful naked witch and an immense talking black cat with a fondness for chess and vodka. The visitors quickly wreak havoc in a city that refuses to believe in either God or Satan, but they also bring peace to 2 unhappy Muscovites. One is the Master, a writer pilloried for daring to write a novel about Christ and Pontius Pilate. The other is Margarita, who loves the Master so deeply that she's willing, literally, to go to hell for him.
That's a pretty great summary, actually. I enjoy that. Except for, I feel like they, played up the beautiful naked witch part, which, yes, is part of his retinue, but I would not put that number 1 on his retinue. But whatever.
Yeah, for sure.
We like nakedness, so, we got to play that up.
Yeah.
Matt, I want to know what you thought about this book. And if there's anyone out there that read this book, I have a very sneaking suspicion that this is not going to be too active and lively of a conversation for a lot of very good reasons. But if anyone read this book, I also want to hear what you thought about it in the chat. I see we have a couple people talking right now. I see Josh and Aqualung, who admits that they didn't finish the book, which is fair. Matt, what did you think of The Master and Margarita?
I think this is one of those books where I really struggled to get through it a lot of the time. It was a very unconventional narrative structure. But on the whole, there's a lot to dig into. There's a lot of questions I'm left with. I think I'm glad we read it. Like it's not so much of a slam dunk as previous literary works that we've read, such as 100 Years of Solitude, where even though that was also a difficult book to get through, in the end, you're like, yeah, that left me with a feeling. I'm going to remember how this book made me feel for the rest of my life.
Yeah.
Or the language being just so magical. This book didn't blow me away in the same regards, but it did make me think quite a bit. And there was a lot of stuff. That did actually work on me pretty well. The way that I decided to describe this book is as a short novella that is a very sensitive and nuanced portrayal of the days of Pontius Pilate, and how really Pontius Pilate kind of stands in for all of us in a way, wrapped in a Soviet Union style Monty Python sketch. And the Monty Python sketch is unfortunately like 900 pages.
Yeah. No, Matt, it was only like 300 pages.
Yeah.
It felt like 900 pages. Yeah, I mean, we over the course of this book club, we have read a lot of classic literature novels. We've read a lot of classic literature novels that are written by and take place in other countries that we don't have intimate knowledge of the language or the culture. Um, and this was definitely one of those. Like, I mean, it reminded me a lot of Satanic Verses in the fact that it was a struggle and a chore for me to read much of the time. Just the sheer number of names that are being thrown at us, references, and frankly, like this is a satire of like 1930s Soviet Union, right?
Yeah.
And we didn't live there, so a lot of the satire, I think, like we can catch like the edges of it, but a lot of it kind of just goes over our head.
Yeah.
And ultimately, I think I did enjoy the book. There are plenty of things to talk about. I was actually I sometimes when I have these books that I'm not sure how I feel about, I just like hop on Goodreads and just read some of the 5-star reviews and some of the 1-star reviews to get what people are feeling about this thing. There's a lot of 1-star reviews out there that essentially sum up as I didn't get it and then therefore it's bad. And I think we can agree that neither you nor I will have that opinion on any book. Just because like it is in my estimation, like if you are not well versed in Soviet Union history and this time period specifically, this is like a crack in a door towards learning more about this time and this place and these things. And so like either this is like the culmination of your studies in 1930s 40s Soviet Union, or this is like the beginning, your first step to understanding and discovering these things. And from that perspective, I really like it because like I was intrigued, I was curious. I didn't understand half of it, but in a way that made me say, I wonder why that is particularly barbed in this world. Like, I mean, and let's be honest for a second here. Like books and things like exploring religion and faith and like what all this stuff means and the critiques of it, like that's my crack. Like I love
Yeah.
that so much. So like the second chapter, we jump back to the crucifixion of Christ, and I'm like, I'm here. We're gonna talk about the crucifixion of Christ from the perspective of Pontius Pilate. That's awesome, actually.
Uh-huh.
So definitely, I think it's Aqua Lungfish is saying they like the story the devil told about Pilate more than the rest of the story, and I think I agree with that for sure.
Yeah. So it's I like everything you said, particularly about, this being kind of inscrutable, but also at the same time it kind of contains within itself its own skeleton key. If you
Yeah,
or at least like perhaps a better metaphor would be a door that's open only a crack, and it's kind of up to you to decide how deep you want to go.
yeah.
Because it's a story about a writer who is never named, who is having just the greatest difficulty getting his novel published. And I mean, you suspect this while reading the novel, but then I read up about the history of the novel, and it's just true that this the master is a stand-in for um, Bulgakov. Am I saying that right?
Yeah, you are, but let's just say here at the top that
Yeah,
we're gonna
we're not
probably
gonna.
pronounce every one of these names wrong. You have a little bit of an advantage on me here since you listened to the audiobook, but I'm
Yeah,
just fucked.
yeah. You are. It's wild, but yeah. So like the the I toward the beginning of the book, I thought that like he was doing a really cute thing where like Bulgakov wanted to publish a story about Pontius Pilate, and knew that like a story with Christian themes was not going to be publishable in the current climate, so he wrapped it in this much more complex wrapping paper. The reason I changed my mind about that is the wrapping paper that he wrapped it in is itself a pointed satire of USSR society,
Hmm.
which was also never going to get published.
Yeah. So
So it's a very uh, the word is escaping me, dissident, almost dissident, at the very least, very sort of politically volatile work. And it in fact wasn't really published. It was that like they were uh, redacted versions that were published, censored, I should say.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And then there was a samizdat, underground version that was circulated, right? Like how hardcore do you have to be to get your novel circulated in the underground in, illicitly printed copies in the illegal book publishing mills of the USSR. So like that to me makes me sort of think the book is cool in a different way.
Yeah.
um, but I thought that was all super interesting.
Yeah, I love all that stuff, and it makes me appreciate the book more. I agree with you. Like, I don't understand all the references, and some of the biggest barbs of the satire, I think, just went completely over my head. But, like, it doesn't take a genius to look at this and say, oh, he has a problem with the artistic society of Russia at the time, right? Like, he paints all the artists outside of the master as kind of like bullshit artists or stuck up pricks that don't really care about the art anymore, that are just using this as like a path to high society. Like, he's very, very clear about how much he hates all these people. And the book is basically just like the first half of the book is literally just Satan flying around fucking with all these people as much as possible.
Yeah.
And the author clearly taking immense pleasure in their displeasure.
Yeah.
It's like, it's a brilliant book, but it's not subtle in that part of it, right? Like, it's very, very clear. Like, you could absolutely see the like aristocracies of art in the Soviet Union at the time reading this thing and being like, what the fuck? How dare you, sir?
Yeah.
How dare you?
Yeah, it was pretty. There were layers to it that took me longer to unpack. In fact, I had to kind of talk the book over with my dad a bit to understand some of it. But there's this recurring motif of money in the story.
Yeah.
And what I got so far, help me out here, is there's this idea of the 30 pieces of silver with Judas. So there's this idea of someone basically selling themselves into hell for basically nothing. And then this basic thing happens over and over again in the book, where people do incredibly dumb, ridiculous things for money.
Mm-hmm.
And then on top of that, the money often gets magically transformed into foreign currency. I'm less sure what to do with that other than just to say it has become worthless now. Like again, you have sold out for nothing, right?
Well, and it's illegal. Like,
Yeah.
that is the big thing. Like, the shop, the currency shop at the very end of the book that the cat and what's his name like went into and basically destroyed. I looked this up. Those were like real things. They were like real markets that only foreign currency would work at. And that's a really, really fascinating little bit of the Soviet Union, right? Which was trying to like stand up on its own and prove that they and their system of government was the best and worked the best, and intermingling with foreign currency, and this idea of greed in a communist society, right? We're supposed to kind of be post greed, right? We shouldn't want money, things, consumerism. Like, no, we shouldn't. But of course people do. Of course they do still.
Yeah.
And that's like the hypocrisy of this whole thing. So yeah, I mean, I think there is obviously, like, we have these two stories running simultaneously, and there is intentionally a lot of parallels between Moscow and Jerusalem in the time of Jesus's execution. I really like the religious stuff. Really, really fascinated me, because I think you're right. Like, this was a movement of atheism, right? Where like it was not considered in high society at this time. I'm pretty sure it was not considered like good to have faith or believe in this kind of stuff. It was like, no, that's silly. We've moved beyond it, type of thing. And the funny thing about it is not as if the story within the story of this book is like particularly like pro Jesus. Like, as a matter of fact, it paints Jesus as just like a guy.
Yeah.
And you just kind of talking about how, hey, I think people are good. It like definitely distorts all what the Bible says, and it specifically calls out the Bible as being absurd, right? It specifically says, like, what do you think? People are just going to write stuff down and they're going to clearly communicate what this guy was saying? No, of course not. That's ridiculous.
But at the same time,
yeah,
God is real. Jesus is the Son of God.
Yes,
and
yes,
Satan
yes.
is real.
Yes, absolutely. But like, first of all, he only has one apostle. There's only one.
Uh-huh.
There's Matthew. Um, Judas was not one of his apostles. Judas was just some guy that like met him 2 days before,
Uh-huh.
and then they were just like, "Hey, you want to get some money?" He was like, "Sure." And yet it's still like he still feels incredibly guilty about it, and it still becomes this thing. So yeah, I mean, it is this thing about like these things are. There's a lot to do with like truth in this, like because essentially what this is offering is these are the true stories of what happened around the crucifixion of Christ, who was the Son of God, but look how we've distorted it thousands of years in the future.
Mm-hmm.
Look how we've changed it. Look how we've played up all these things. Look, presumably the other testaments of the apostles were just 11 other dudes just saying, "Yeah, I knew that guy. Yeah,
Yeah.
here, let me tell you about him." And
Yeah.
it's all just bullshit, right?
Right.
So yeah,
Yeah.
like it's really interesting because he clearly was like, I'm gonna piss off the Christians and the atheists at the same time.
Yeah. Right. I like, one thing that he has the Satan character repeatedly say is like these Muscovites are really no different than they ever were.
Yeah.
And I think, that's pointed at this idea of the new Soviet man, and this idea that by being this atheist, intellectual, rationalistic society, that we're not like those, those benighted old fools who believed in fake things, and Satan is able to manipulate them just as well, if not better, perhaps,
Mm-hmm.
than he ever used to, because these people don't even believe in evil.
Yeah. Yeah, you're absolutely right. And I think one of the interesting things about the devil, like, I think this does actually challenge your perceptions of like clearly good and clearly evil. Because like the devil is the devil, right? Like this is Satan, and we're seeing Satan in it. I'm not saying he's like good in this story, but like he often doesn't act in the way you would expect, like Satan to
Yeah.
act. Like there like with Margarita specifically, like he rewards her goodness, right? Like she is unselfish. She makes a moral choice to end the eternal suffering of this poor woman, and gets rewarded for that. And that's
Yeah.
like I think there's one ironic moment is like, oh, thank goodness I made a deal with the devil. It's like, wait a minute, no, that's not supposed to be a good thing, actually. But
Yeah.
this book, I mean, this book is challenging the idea that evil doesn't exist. I think you're right, but it's also trying to turn what we do and don't consider evil on its head. And I liked that.
Yeah. In the movie Bedazzled, how the devil is trying to, get Brendan Fraser to learn a lesson, and then in the end you're like, was that really the devil? That's exactly what this movie was. It was,
Yeah, you're
this
right.
book, rather.
Master and Margarita and Bedazzled are two great seminal
Yeah.
works of society and culture, and should be measured equally together. I agree.
I'm simply saying that the character of the devil in both stories is the same. So that's
I know what you're saying.
there's just a direct through line.
I just couldn't believe it came up in this conversation. I'm very happy about it.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, it is a funny book often, right? Like,
Yes.
I wasn't laughing, but it's not just a satire in the sense that like Animal Farm is a satire. No one has ever laughed at Animal Farm. It's a satire in the sense where it's actually being humorous, and especially, the devil and his retinue being goofy and sort of, I mean, they're all sort of like impishly destructive.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And most of the bad things that they do are kind of not actually bad, right? Like they're ultimately teaching someone a lesson.
Yeah.
And that person ends up better off. I can think of very few things they do that are just straightforwardly just like really evil. This is not Fallen. This is it's closer to Bedazzled. I'm going to keep bringing up Bedazzled for the entire rest of the conversation. No, I liked the Pontius Pilate stuff a lot, like you said. I
Yeah.
liked it almost felt, well, and I think this is intentional actually. It felt like the Bedazzled stuff is what I was going to say. The Pontius Pilate stuff was totally different. Like it's a totally different story from a totally different authorial voice embedded in this book it really felt like it was written by a different person. Like it's supposed to. It's supposed to feel like it was written by the master, who's this character.
Yeah.
And then the framing story is written in this much more whimsical tone with like these longer sentences, and the intern, the Pontius Pilate story is full of this very vivid, beautiful, descriptive writing, and these heavy emotional ideas of what these characters are going through.
Yeah.
It's totally, I don't know, I found that to be one of the most remarkable things about the book is the mastery of the authorial voice and style and tone and everything shifting between the two sections.
Yeah, yeah, and I mean it read so much more traditionally narrativized that I found myself flying through those chapters with relative ease. And honestly, like, to be fair, a lot of this could just be that there were just a lot of Russian names thrown at me, and I just had just an incredibly difficult time parsing them and remembering which Ivan was which. Like, whenever they refer to the one Ivan as homeless, I was like, okay, I got it. But then there's like another Ivan whose last name is also ends in Vich, and I'm like, I don't remember which one this is at
Uh-huh.
all. And that
Yeah.
was the struggle for me. I mean, it reminded me of 100 Years of Solitude in that regard, where 100 Years of Solitude is intentionally like throwing the same six names at you, but they all mean different characters. But like, that's in that book, it's by design. I don't know if it's by design in this book, or if it's just I'm reading about Russian characters and I'm a stupid American who just sees these names as gobbledygook, where a Russian reader at the time would just see them as their names and just parse that and move on with it.
Hmm.
So I don't know. Maybe I'm wrong about that. Maybe he intentionally. I mean, I think he is having some fun with some of the names, right? Like,
Mm-hmm.
what was the one guy's name? The cook at the God, what was his name? His name felt like a joke. Like, it was, it
Yeah.
was like,
Yeah, it was like something of itch, right?
yeah, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I don't know. I'm not sure. I'm not really sure. This might just be the way Russian novels are written, honestly. I don't think we've read many of them.
I mean, I have not
Um,
read War and Peace, but I know enough about War and Peace to know that it is a tome of characters out the ass being thrown at you at all
mhm.
times. So, yeah, this might just be Russian literature in general. But like the thing was on the the Pontius Pilate side of this, that was all easier to parse. One, because we know most of the characters in Pontius Pilate in like the crucifixion story, right? Like, yes, they didn't call Jesus Jesus, but they called him Yeshua, and we know that, right? We know Pontius Pilate, we know Matthew, we know Judas, and the rest of them just kind of fit in there. So that was a lot easier to parse.
Mhm. Yeah, I mean, it's kind of telling that like when you try to read a summary of this book, they actually just skip tons of stuff
Yeah,
because it's so inconsequential. It's like the whole thing where the devil's in the theater trolling everyone. It's like this is such a long, or like not that actually. The devil in the theater trolling everyone was kind of a set piece. It's the stuff where there's like everything's going wild in the theater office,
yeah,
the offices of the theater. If you had a gun to my head, I couldn't tell you who anyone was there, whether they
yeah.
showed up again, and why that was supposed to matter. Um,
Yeah, I mean, it can be summarized in like a line, right? Which is just like they all got fucked and
mhm.
tricked out of money, or like everyone was manipulated and disappeared, and some of them show up again and some of them don't. And that's essentially all you need, right? Um, that the devil is just fucking with these people to get the show on, because I think it says in the book specifically, like, he doesn't give a shit about the theater. This was just the best entry point to get the attention of people and to prove a point, which is essentially that, as you said, they're the same as they always have been. I do love the moment where I don't think the book ever actually spells out the fact that all the women's clothes just disappear after a small amount of time, but it just constantly cuts to like, and then there was just a naked woman running through the streets, which I
Yeah,
thought was really great.
I think it's not until basically the denouement when it's talking about all the stuff that happened that it
Yeah.
actually, or maybe you're right, maybe it never quite says it, but it did take me a while to piece together what had happened and the fact that the clothes had disappeared, just like the money transforms into,
Yeah.
um, yeah, I like that as a metaphor for like you've given away your, your dignity for nothing,
Mm-hmm.
right? By
Yep.
by accepting this. Yeah, the portrayal of Russian society was, I think, particularly interesting because I don't know about you, but I feel like I'm overly educated about like the Stalinist period and the
Mm-hmm.
World War II adjacent period of Russian history because so many movies are concerned with this.
Sure.
And the Soviet Union is always portrayed as like, first of all, having like a grayscale filter over it and having these brutalist buildings. But like this was only, 10 or 15 or 20 years after the Tsar was killed.
Mm-hmm.
So this is very early Soviet Union, but still Soviet Union. So you've got Russia, you've got the real culture of Russia and Russians, but interposed on it is this Soviet system, and there's a much different vibe. There's just a totally different feel to this than I've ever read or seen or been exposed to regarding like Soviet life. And I think one of the reasons you and I like kept putting this on the list is that we kind of are fascinated with this this idea of like I personally love reading novels from different cultures,
Yeah.
trying to understand how differently people can see things. And so that was a kind of a highlight for me about this book.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. Like it is like this really like this young Soviet Union lens of like look at this guy illustrate all the problems in this new form of government that we're trying it for the first time, and how are things going, and you can tell the people are still trying to figure it out as well, right? Like they're not sure. And I mean the epilogue was really fascinating to me because essentially what we get to is no one knew how to process anything that happened, and so we just all like collectively decided that it didn't,
Uh-huh.
and then we moved on. And that's this really like the kind of the big bang conceit of what he's saying about this whole place, this whole society, this whole culture is that like the things we set up to believe this certain thing, and we're going to do this certain thing, and we're going to become these people, and anything that doesn't fit with that idea is kind of cast aside and ignored, and we're just not going to think about it anymore, and therefore it won't be there anymore. But of course it still is.
Yeah.
Of course it's right there. Yeah, I really love that idea.
It's a troop of hypnotists.
Yeah, exactly.
I just find that to be the most like overtly funny aspect of all
Yeah.
of this is that it's like, oh yeah, it's just hypnotists. They can do anything.
Yeah.
Uh, I thought it was interesting. I don't know that this is going to go anywhere necessarily, but interesting that the story is called The Master and Margarita, and we don't meet either of those characters for what felt like half of the book. I mean, I could be wrong.
We meet the master like before the halfway point, but it is literally book 2.
Mm-hmm.
This book is divided into 2 books, and it's literally book 2 where we first meet Margarita. And I think this is also part of the reason why I liked the second half of the book so much more than the first half. And I think Christopher in chat agrees with us on this.
Mm-hmm.
I do think like we did kind of tread water a little bit. Like there was part of me, and I know I'm going to say this knowing full well that so much of the stuff went over my head, but there was part of me in this first half of like the devil just fucking with people that I was kind of like, okay, I got it. I get it. Can we move on now? And it felt like I really wanted to get, I didn't even know what I wanted to get to, but I remember reading the first chapter of book 2 where we're introduced to Margarita, and we can kind of see that the main thrust of the actual plot of the book is going to be her and her relationship with the master. That I was like, finally I was like, oh, this is the book. This is actually what I was wanting, what I was waiting for, and I just didn't even know it yet.
In some ways, it feels like Margarita is the first character that we meet in the story.
Yes.
Because she has like an inner life, and the short story is obviously not correct because it's a novel, but the interlude or the part where we get to understand like the master and Margarita and their love nest and who these characters are and their romance and the sort of obsession over this story about Pontius Pilate and her love for him, and that was all so vivid and beautiful, and I was like, man, this is great. what was all that other crap?
Yeah, exactly. Like this is what I wanted the whole time. I wanted to be this. I wanted to be the story of Margarita, and I wanted to be Pontius Pilate. And I wish the book was just those two things. But like, I understand. This is where I like step back and say I understand that like all that other stuff was quintessential to what Bulgakov was trying to do, and so it's like saying I didn't want it is like saying like I'm not happy with you making a book about satire, which is just an absurd thing to say. So
Yeah.
ultimately, that's where I feel with this book is like every critique I have of it comes from a place of, oh, but this book really wasn't like for me, actually.
Yeah. Right. I mean, again, I don't know if this is true, but it feels like he was a guy who maybe wanted to write a book about Pontius Pilate, or maybe wanted to write a book about the doomed love of these, writers, but he had to like dress it up in
Mm-hmm.
this comical farce.
Yeah.
I say that, and then it's like, yeah, but he didn't actually get it published. So
Yeah.
so maybe the comical farce was actually him just taking like embittered swipes at the establishment.
Yeah, I mean, and you're absolutely right. Like as you said at the beginning, the comical farce is just as unpublishable as as anything else. So yeah, I mean, like you could perhaps construct this narrative where he wanted to write about Pontius Pilate, got rejected, got pissed off, and then took out his frustrations by writing more of the books. Like, fine, you're not going to publish this. Well, then I'm going to go for it. Then not only am I going to do something that's both anti-atheist, but also like heretical, but then also I'm going to insult all of you and your entire culture and society at the same time. Like this is no holds barred type of thing.
Yeah. I don't know. I wish I knew. I wish I better understood. But like you said, the stuff that directly relates to the religious themes, I thought was fascinating. Particularly, so one part. Maybe we can just talk about this part. The ball, the evil satanic ball where all these characters from hell come up. That to me reminded me of Dante's Inferno, which if you've ever read it, Dante's Inferno is actually totally opaque for the same reasons this book is, which is that you've got Dante meeting all these people in hell, and they're all just people that the author doesn't like. And he's like, and that's why you're in hell, because you're greedy and you're slothful, and you were a betrayer, and but you don't know who any of these people are. Like, so
yeah.
So I felt that way during the ball, where I'm like, am I supposed to know who this is?
Well, I mean, that's the fascinating thing about this book to me, because I completely agree with you. And so you did the audiobook, but the version of the book I had has like a lot of footnotes in it. And I usually like don't check the footnotes because I just find it like terribly disruptive. So the version I had footnotes, but they were the kind where they just put them all at the back of the book, which would have not actual footnotes, which would have been like extremely distracting to have to go flip back every single time. But the one place I did was the ball, because there's like just one after another, and like, by the way, knowing who those people are that are referenced does nothing for you. It just does nothing. But like the thing is, at the same time, I found something absolutely entrancing about that scene anyway. Like, if you just let yourself be okay with not knowing who any of the specific people are, and you just kind of fall into the language of what is happening in the scene, like, I think it ends up working on you. And that's like kind of the mode I had to get into for a large amount of this book.
Yeah. Oh, I found it that was one of the parts that I found very visually arresting to imagine. There were certain parts of this book that I found impossible to imagine visually, and then there were certain parts that I found incredibly compelling actually to imagine visually, and that was one of the ones where like you could imagine an adaptation made of this nightmarish Satan's ball, and it being quite intense. That would be I don't know. I don't think this will ever be adapted. Actually, let me check that there isn't already an adaptation before I say that.
There's got to be. Or I would find it Yeah, there's definitely adaptations.
Yeah, there is. 2024, 2023, 2024 film.
Wow.
It looks really intense. It's a Russian fantasy drama. Um, it has so by the way, I don't know how it was spelled in your book, but the name that the devil takes on is Voland.
Yeah, it was spelled like Woland,
Yeah,
Wlland, but I gathered that was one of the names where I was like, you probably don't pronounce it that way.
yeah.
So yeah, I did like how many times characters in this novel say "the devil take you" or something like that,
Uh-huh.
and it's like I'm pretty sure the devil himself says that at some point, which is
Yeah.
just delightful. Um, I mean, so I guess I just want to like talk broadly about like Judas and Pontius Pilate and how like these are some of the most fascinating characters to me ever. Like not even specific to this book, but just like in general. I'm
Uh-huh.
endlessly fascinated by these guys and their brief but incredibly impactful involvement in one of the greatest stories ever told, like known by the most amount of people ever, probably. And I'm so like you can kind of tell why someone would want to write about Pontius Pilate because like I just remember as a kid being told about this guy and being like, that's really funny that we say his name in the fucking Apostles' Creed over and
Uh-huh.
over again, and he was just some Roman governor who was like, all right, what do you want? It's like, well, we want you to sentence this guy to death. What did he do? Nothing.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, I
So
know you have this tradition of like acquitting one of these people, and here's this horrible guy that actually was trying to incite violence against the government, and here's this other guy who says people are good. Which one do you want me to save? The bad one. What?
yeah.
Like, and then now he's remembered throughout history forever, forever.
Yeah.
Like, this is a name that's going to be synonymous with Christ. Is Judas and Pontius Pilate, and I just find that endlessly fascinating. Like, what was this person like? Like, if we're gonna say that this is like historically accurate stuff, like, what was it like to perhaps realize, or perhaps not realize, but maybe on some level realize you were going down in history? You know, like
Hmm.
I don't know. I'm fascinated by it.
Yeah. I for my part along these lines, I was really affected by this refrain that he keeps saying of cowardice is the greatest sin.
Mm-hmm.
Um, which I mean is not not really particularly a biblical concept. Like I
No.
don't think it's biblically speaking, it's not true that cowardice is the greatest sin. But like in context of this book, which is again a sort of transgressive novel, uh, uh, where the author is in some sense being brave just by writing it,
Yeah.
trying to stand up for what he believes in, and then we have Pontius Pilate who what he does is he just goes with the flow.
Yeah.
Like it's a perfect example of the banality of evil, and it's such a like inconsequential seeming example of it, where it's like
Yeah.
your job is big and important, and you're this super important guy. It almost doesn't make sense for you to care about this one, like the people of this nation, they want to execute this guy for political reasons. Just rubber stamp it, man, don't worry about it. And then he does, and then he's like haunted by that.
He like instantly knows it was the wrong decision.
Yeah,
Like instantly. Like
exactly. Yeah,
it's yeah, that's wonderful.
the fact that he's haunted by it is almost like irrational. I mean it sort of is irrational, because he's like he doesn't even quite understand why he's bothered by this. Like he
Yeah.
doesn't think like it's because I just condemned the Son of God to
Yeah.
death
Yeah.
and sort of doomed humanity.
It,
He
it, it,
doesn't.
it what it is what he says is like I felt like there was more to
Yeah,
talk with him about. Like that's it. Like that
yeah,
there's more to understand, more to reason. Like this is I think perhaps what we're saying in the argument of the book is Jesus Christ is not a stand-in for the Son of God, but Jesus Christ is the stand-in for like knowledge and understanding and growing and empathy and all these things that require continued conversation, that require not killing or removing or excising.
yeah,
And so like there was more to be said here. There was more to understand here. There was more to learn here. And it's very clear that Bulgakov thinks that like censorship is essentially the crucifixion of Christ, right? The idea that there are certain things we can't talk about or shouldn't talk about or should make very clear. I like the opening of this book is two characters arguing about one's essay on Jesus Christ because it didn't make clear enough. Like, oh yeah, you made him look like shit, but you also implied that he existed, and therefore that's unacceptable, which is just like an absurd argument to have.
I forgot about that, but yeah, that's actually pretty important to remember.
Yeah.
No, that's great. Yeah, I love this idea of comparing censorship broadly with, you're killing the voice of the divine before it can say its piece, and thereby you're dooming humanity to darkness. I mean, I think that's great. I didn't actually put it together quite like that. I love that.
Yeah. Yeah. See, that's why like I like this book a whole lot, but like,
Yeah.
and this is the type of thing where we've had this conversation so many times over the course of however many years we've been doing this book club, where it's like, this was very often not an enjoyable book for me to read. I finished it an hour before this conversation because I was just like having to force myself through it. But I recognized as I read it that this is an important seminal work that should be read by as many people as possible and leads to great conversation, which is really, at the end of the day, kind of all you want, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think even during the parts when I was struggling, I was aware of like the artistic merit of the thing. Like there's sometimes when you're struggling, you're just like, this sucks. And it, like, I was actually just like, I'm not being entertained right now, but I get that this is a layered and honestly beyond my skill level, like thing that he's doing here. He's doing so many interlayered different things. And also while also doing the fascinating tonal balancing act where he's like switching effortlessly between super serious weighty themes and heavy tone and just jokey lighthearted silliness with the cat doing stuff, and now we're in a mental asylum, and even sort of a gray area where like it's kind of funny that this guy is like there's satiric elements about the way the mental asylum works, but also there's a lot of just like earnest misery and suffering associated with that. For a minute there, I wondered if we were going to do a thing where like the whole story is homeless's schizophrenic delusion. But I don't think that's what we were doing. But
what did you think about the fact that like Homeless ends the book abandoning poetry? He's no longer a poet and he becomes a historian and philosopher. Like, is that Bulgakov trying to say something about art?
I think so. Well, so my understanding is that the kind of poetry that he was doing as a poet was just like being a mouthpiece of the state and like writing the kinds of art that he thought would be popular, not actually saying anything from his own heart. And by changing into doing philosophy, it's a way of saying like he's actually interested in asking and pursuing these important questions and not just pretending.
And I'm pretty sure Homeless is supposed to be. I think the master calls him a disciple, right? So like he's an apostle of the master in the same way that Matthew is an apostle of Christ, right? So I think that does matter. That like his kid, like the master dies at the end of this thing and goes off to limbo, I guess, not heaven, but not hell. I don't actually know where they are.
Yeah, I don't know what to make of the ending, or specifically this element where there's a lot of weird stuff where like the master and Margarita are sent back to their little love nest, and then
Jesus comes. Well, the disciple of Jesus comes and says they have to die.
And it says and then they are poisoned by one of the devil's henchmen, and then they're dead. But then then one of the henchmen is like, "You're not dead," and they're like, "Oh, good." But they are.
Yeah.
And then they go writing, in the most visually stunning sequence of the book.
Yeah.
go riding these flying horses out into the sky, and all the henchmen like transform into these eldritch forms that I just love. It
It's
felt
so
like a totally
badass.
different
Yeah.
book. That
Yeah.
felt like such a different story when like the goofy wall-eyed guy transforms into like a knight with streaming black hair or whatever. You're like, what are we? What
Yeah.
is this is yet more Dante Alighieri references to things I don't
Yes.
understand,
Well,
certainly.
that's what I think. Like, I kind of go back to Dante when I'm thinking of what happened to the Master and Margarita. That they're like, Matthew specifically says they are not meant for the light, right? So they are not going to heaven. That's
Hmm.
not where they are. But they're not suffering in hell. They're not being tortured like the poor woman who has to see the handkerchief every morning is being tortured. So they are in a kind of limbo. They are in a kind of between. But the book paints it as like a happy ending for them. They get to be together. They get to live in eternity in this place where the master, his book isn't like published, but like he frees, like his book does, I guess, ultimately like the greatest thing it can do, which is he created in the novel this character of Pilate, and he frees him from
Hmm.
his tormenting. So like that's like the ultimate reward there, that like Pontius Pilate has been sitting there for 2,000 years driven by the guilt of his inaction, and he
Hmm.
is freed of that through storytelling, essentially, right? Through the book, through like this is I think what the book is saying about why we have to talk about these things and write these things and make this art that challenges things, because it can be a release, it can be a way to let go and to learn and to move on, um, and to understand, and yeah.
Yeah, so and it doesn't matter, I suppose, that the book is never published. It's just through the act of telling
Yes.
to even one audience, to one audience member, which is Margarita.
Yeah.
That's enough to redeem this man. Yeah, I love that. That's great.
Yeah, because I mean, I think that's so profound, because ultimately, like the desire, the argument in this book is like the desire to be published turns you into these upper class aristocrats of art that are like all they care about is status, and publishing gives them status. And that's kind of what the trap the master got stuck in, where he perceived himself as a failure and this book worth nothing because no one wanted to publish it, and which of course is our author talking about himself, right? Almost, and not in, I don't think that's the interesting thing, is I never got the vibe from this book that he's like, I am fucking awesome and none of you appreciate me. It's like I am working through my own insecurities at the fact that the things I want to talk about, nobody seems to want to listen to.
Yeah.
And I don't know. I think there's a lot of value in like this being his kind of his own, like letting himself go, and letting through the power of this book, he like allows himself to be off the hook for not getting published. And the great irony of that, of course, is that it becomes this world renowned book that will probably be remembered for years and years and years.
Yeah. Yeah, right. That's one thing it really has going for it, is this sense of sort of like desperate earnestness.
Yeah.
That it's probably the least commercial book you'll ever read, right?
Yep. Yep.
Which I think makes a lot of the parts that are not entertaining much more easy to swallow, because you're like, look, he was trying to do something he felt was really important, and sorry if that's not as fun as the Da Vinci Code.
you picked you picked the best possible book for that. Oh my god. Yeah, yeah, I mean like that's ultimately like why I want to read something like this, is not because I'm going to be like entertained in the same way I'm entertained by reading just like a really tightly told story in a novel. I want to
Mhm.
learn and I want to grow and I want to understand something. And I feel like, you know, I definitely don't understand 1930s Soviet Union completely by reading this novel, certainly not, but I have a window into it, and it makes me want to read a little bit more.
Yeah.
This is what reading literature from other countries can do for you, by the way. Like the
Yeah.
same thing happened with Satanic Verses, same thing happened with 100 Years of Solitude. Like these are what these books do, and they're often not like fun reads. They're like, imagine The Master and Margarita as a beach read. No, of course not.
Yeah.
It doesn't have to be that.
Right.
Yeah.
There's just one thing I don't have like a point with it. I just thought it was kind of a delightful twist. Um, so let me recontextualize. So after Pontius Pilate condemns Jesus and after Jesus is killed, he basically spends the whole rest of the book like desperately trying to atone in some kind of generalized sense, where he's like paying back a guy who spotted him $5 earlier,
Yeah.
and like making all these promises to people. And then one thing he does, which is the twist that I wanted to get to, is he's the one who kills Judas, which
I
I'm
loved it.
pretty sure is not biblically, supported. But like, I just love that as an idea where it's like, it's not even really justice. Like it's like he's desperately trying to do anything he can do to kind of mitigate or atone for his mistake, but also like knows that it won't. And he's also kind of in denial about this fact too, I think. Like in denial about his own motivations to some degree.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. What did you think about all that, I guess?
I loved it. I will say it took me an embarrassing amount of time to read through the subtext of what Pilate was saying to his assassin guy,
Uh-huh.
like where he's like over and over again, no, you don't understand, I know he's gonna die tonight. And like for some reason my thick head was like, oh no, you're telling him to kill him.
Uh-huh.
I got it. It took me a
Yeah.
little too long to get that.
Yeah.
But I did love that very much. And yeah, I mean, I'm pretty sure the biblical story of Judas is that he, through his guilt and remorse, kills himself, which is funny because this book basically postulates that like the reason that story is there because Pilate's like, oh, could he have possibly killed himself? And the guy's like,
out of guilt.
and the guy's like, no, that's ridiculous. Certainly not. Like he was stabbed. Like no one's gonna believe that. And they're just like, no. If we tell that everyone that they will believe that. And then of course that's the story, right?
Yeah. I love that.
So yeah, I mean, it was great. It was really interesting. Yeah, that he is desperately like that's like he knows he fucked up right away. That's the thing I like. He just knows.
Yeah.
That it just and is like, and also like part of the reason why Jesus was sentenced to death is because Pontius Pilate had a migraine the day of their meeting, which is also just funny.
Right. And relatable. Yeah.
Yeah.
I therefore, but the grace of God go I.
So are you saying you too would have damned Jesus Christ if he caught you on a bad day?
If the sun is too hot and bright, I'm just like whatever, fine. Crucifixions all around.
Yeah.
I like that. Like you talked about the metaphorical element of Christ as a stand-in for like being a storyteller.
Mm-hmm.
But I think there's also like a literal level on which like this stuff that like Yeshua doesn't have very many speaking lines in this story, but like the few things he does say are just like this very simple, earnest, like they're talking about the Roman guard that they refer to as the rat slayer, who's apparently this just like vicious murderer, torturer.
Mm-hmm.
And Yeshua is just like, he's a man like any other. He's worth, he it's a simple kind of believing the best in people, seeing the best in people, even to the extent of not being capable of seeing Judas's deception. And what's interesting is that this, like the purity of this, is able to sneak past all of Pontius Pilate's worldliness and sophistication, and just strikes him as just being enormously appealing. And I feel like that's like on a very mundane, like low sort of story level, like that's what catches his attention about Yeshua is that he's just this guy who has this very humble, earnest, straightforward attitude toward life, and it's nothing grandiose, and it's not even like an articulated philosophy. It's just like, we should have mercy and be kind and be generous of spirit.
Yeah.
And this is so like that is what what totally derails Pilate's life, actually.
Yeah, yeah. And not to proselytize too much here, but like that's why Christianity's such a big religion in our world
Hmm.
now, right? It's like that idea
Hmm.
resonated a lot with people back then, and it
Hmm.
grew and spread for that very reason. Yeah.
Yeah.
Despite the fact that the church has just a whole lot of problems, just a whole
Yeah.
has and always had just a whole host of issues. But that central idea is, I think, yes, a
I
fascinating one.
I kind of like what the book does, where it's incredibly sacrilegious in a formal sense, while
Yes,
also
100%.
being like super nuanced about this specific kernel of of I think what the author sees as being like a really core beautiful idea
Yeah,
of the Christian, religion and philosophy and so on.
and perhaps ultimately that's his problem with extreme atheism, is throwing the baby out with the bathwater type of
Hmm.
thing, which is like not saying you have to believe all this dogma and doctrine and yada yada yada, but like there are some interesting ideas here worthy of discussing and exploring, but you're saying we can't because it has the name Jesus Christ next to it, right? Which is just silly, right? And I think that's part of his argument here.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah. All right. Gosh, I don't know if I have anything else to say about this book. How about you?
No, I think I hit the highlights of what I wanted to get through.
I
I Yeah, go ahead.
sorry, I would suggest everyone reading that either didn't finish it or hasn't read it yet. I think I would recommend it, or and recommend you kind of try to power your way through it. I think you will feel like it was worth it at the end.
Yeah.
Even if it yes is a difficult read. I think it is good for us every once in a while to read something that is a difficult, not easy, have to like push your way through it read. And that's definitely this book.
Yeah, there have been books that I've finished because we had to finish them, and but this one was one where, in the end, I think it does. It's not that it comes together in the sense of having like a satisfying narrative resolution, but it comes together in the realm of ideas
Yeah. Yeah.
and making you kind of better understand what we were saying the whole time. And there's some really great stuff in there. I've almost been like repeating. I don't know if you have this, but like sometimes your brain will pick some, phrase to repeat throughout the
Mm-hmm.
day, and I've been sort of getting the cowardice is the worst sin on a little loop in my head,
I
which
like
is an
that.
interesting thing to have going in the back of your head.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I like that. I like that a lot. All right, so that is The Master and Margarita. I just have linked the straw poll again for those that showed up late. You can vote for two of our five books for next month. I'm gonna just spend a few seconds here refreshing the poll. Um, okay. All right, I'm gonna lock it now, Matt.
Okay.
Show results. Okay, so we have four. Sorry, this is a real time calculating here. All right, so it looks like the winning book this month is The Maltese Falcon, which is a hard case crime novel that a rather good movie was based off of. I've seen the movie. I enjoy the movie a whole lot. I've never read the book, and Matt and I were talking about kind of hard boiled detective novels when we were covering Stephen King's Mr. Mercedes a month ago or so, and we hadn't covered any on the book club, so I'm glad someone had nominated this, and it looks like everyone else wants to read it. So that's what we're going to be doing. The Maltese Falcon by Dashiell Hammett will be next month's book. Matt, I think I will be out of town on the 25th, 3 weeks from now, so I think we'll have to do a book club on November 1st, which is
Sounds
four
good.
weeks, so we probably should have done it that day anyway, just because
Yeah.
it gives people 4 weeks. Um, so yeah, that will be when book club is. We'll be talking about the Maltese Falcon. I will get the post up. I failed completely in that last month because the audio from our our episode last month just got totally screwed by all the same problems we had with that episode. Also, just completely ate my audio somehow. So this is going to go better now. We got a better setup now, and we're going to be good. So that's going to be next month. So, yeah, thank you, everyone, for hanging out. I hope you guys enjoyed this conversation. And if you're listening to this after the fact, if you're listening to the audio version, we hope you come hang out next month live because it's fun.
Yeah. Had a great time with everybody. If you like what we do here at Doof Media and you want to see more of it, then please head on over to our Patreon at patreon.com/doofmedia and consider donating to support our organization. At any available level, you'll get access to the vote for the books we talk about each month, as well as a bunch of other cool exclusive features. So go check it out.
That's right. And if you have any questions or comments or just want to reach out to us, you can find us on Twitter at doofmedia, or you can email us at doofmedia@gmail.com. I'm also going to, right now in the chat, send a link to our for our submission club, our submission form for the book club. Basically, that thing had been going on for like almost 7 years, and it got really unwieldy. So I just kind of excised all the submissions, put them off to the side, and started fresh. So which means we need new submissions from you folks. So please take the time to go to that form and submit some books. I will also put this in the show notes of the episode if you're listening after the fact, but please send in your submissions. We're starting from fresh, so we need to populate that list so we have stuff to pick from next month. But yeah, Matt, it was like 400 books long, and there were so many duplicates. It was just out of control. So I got sick of it and just needed to say, okay, we're starting over. So that's what we're doing. So please send those submissions in, and hopefully we'll get to read some of your books.
Yeah, sounds great.
All right, folks, have a good weekend. We will see you all next month. Cool. Thank you, everyone. We're going to go. I'm hot. I put the sweater on because I was cold, and then I got really hot. I got really hot.
And you can't take it off with your headphones on.
No, I can't. So, all right, folks. We'll see you later. Thank you for hanging out. That was a lot of fun. Bye.
Bye.
Cool.